Hello everyone, this video is about the 1963 crash of Pan Am 214 in Cecil County, Maryland. It was a devastatingly catastrophic crash and was arguably the worst plane crash in Maryland history. With that being said, let's get right into it. Pan Am Flight 214 was a regularly scheduled flight from Isla Verde International Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico to Philadelphia International Airport with a scheduled stopover at Baltimore's Friendship Airport. Flight 214 left San Juan at 4:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 8, 1963, with 140 passengers and 8 crew members aboard. It arrived in Baltimore at 7:10 p.m. The crew did not report any maintenance issues or problems during the flight. After 67 passengers disembarked in Baltimore, the aircraft departed at 8:24 p.m. with its remaining 73 passengers for the flight's final leg to Philadelphia International Airport. The aircraft was a Boeing 707-121 named the Clipper Tradewind. It was the oldest commercial jet airliner in the United States at the time of the crash. It had been delivered to Pan Am on October 27, 1958, and had flown a total of 14,609 hours. It was powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney turbojet engines with an estimated value of $3.4 million, which is equivalent to almost $35 million today. In 1959, the aircraft had been involved in an incident in which the right outboard engine was torn from the wing during a training flight in France. The plane was reported to have entered a sudden spin during a demonstration of the aircraft's minimum control speed, during which the engine broke away. Fortunately, that pilot gained control of the aircraft and landed safely in London, using the remaining 3 engines. The detached engine fell into a field on a farm southwest of Paris where the flight had originated. On December 8, 1963, the pilot in command was 45-year-old George F. Knuth of Long Island. He had flown for Pan Am for 22 years and had 17,000-some hours of flying experience, including almost 3,000 in the Boeing 707. In 1949, he was the captain of Pan Am Flight 100, which collided during flight with a Cessna 140, ultimately killing the 2 occupants of the Cessna, but with no injuries to the passengers or crew in his own aircraft. First officer was John R. Dale, age 48, also of Long Island. He had almost 14,000 hours of flying time, of which 2,681 were in the Boeing 707. The second officer was Paul L. Oringer, age 42, of New Rochelle, New York. He had relatively 10,000 hours, including 2,808 in Boeing 707 aircraft. The flight engineer was John R. Cantliner of Long Island. He had around 6,000 hours, including 76 in the Boeing 707. Upon approaching Philadelphia on December 8, 1963, the pilots made radio contact with air traffic control at 8:42 p.m. The controller informed the pilots that the airport was experiencing a line of thunderstorms, strong winds, and turbulence. The controller then asked whether the pilots of 214 wanted to proceed directly to the airport or to enter a holding pattern to wait for the storm to pass. The crew chose the latter, alongside 5 other aircraft. The controller told the pilots to expect a delay of about 30 minutes. Heavy rainfall, coupled with frequent lightning and gusts of wind of up to 50 miles per hour, was reported in the holding area. At 8:58 p.m., the aircraft exploded. The pilots transmitted a final message yelling, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, Clipper 214, out of control, here we go." Seconds later, the first officer of National Airlines Flight 016, flying 1,000 feet higher in the same pattern, radioed, "Clipper 214 is going down in flames."
Visible was a section still burning hours last night after the crash, still burning despite the rain. Other fires that had been washed out still smoldered, much of the smoke coming from a 20-foot wide, 6-foot deep crater gouged in the soggy earth. Much of the debris smoldered all through the night. By day, the horror became more evident. Debris from the jetliner was spread over a mile-square area of the sloping farmland. This an unusually a large amount of destruction. Some of the wreckage landed in the front yards of homes within 75 yards of the crater, homes which somehow escaped serious damage and the people inside any injury. Mrs. Rudolph Ola, mother of 14-month-old Nancy, saw it years later told something of the last moments of Flight 214.
Gentlemen, we have extracted from the air traffic control tower at Philadelphia that portion of the tape which deals with Pan American Flight 214.
First, a crew member on the radio.
Clipper 214, out of control. Clipper 214 is going down in flames. What? Clipper 214. Roger, your message has been received.
The last moments of Clipper 214. Herbert Kaplow, NBC News.
A half hours following that first announcement, all persons waiting the arrival of Pan American Flight 214 from Puerto Rico, please report to the Public Health Service room. Anxiously, they filed into the room to learn that there had been an accident. The effect was instantaneous. For some, it meant the loss of parents. For another party who had brought rice to welcome a honeymoon couple,
the aircraft crashed in a cornfield in Cecil County, Maryland, just east of Elkton, near the Delaware Turnpike, setting the rain-soaked field on fire. The plane was destroyed and everyone on board was killed. It was the first Pan Am jet to crash since the company had introduced its jet fleet. A Maryland state trooper who had been patrolling on Maryland Route 213 transmitted an alert on his radio as he drove toward the crash site. He was the first emergency responder at the location and later stated, "It wasn't a large fire, it was several smaller fires." The largest section of the aircraft was the fuselage with 8 or 10 window frames. There was also a wing and a couple of tail wings lying in the area, which was subsequently a debris field at the moment. It didn't resemble an airplane anymore. The engines were buried in the ground approximately 10 to 15 feet as a result of the force generated by the impact. Firefighters and police officers soon recognized that a rescue operation was pointless. Unfortunately, all they could do was extinguish the fires and begin collecting bodies. The wreckage burned in intense fires that lasted more than 4 hours. First responders and police from across the county, along with men from the United States Naval Training Center, Bainbridge, assisted with the response. They positioned flares around the area to define the accident scene. They also set up searchlights to illuminate the area, ensuring the debris and human remains were not disturbed by curious spectators. The remains of the victims were brought to the National Guard Armory in Philadelphia, where a temporary morgue was set up. Relatives arrived looking for information, but officials said it would be impossible to visually identify the victims. The state medical examiner took 9 days to complete the identification of each victim, using fingerprints, dental records, and personal effects found nearby. In some cases, the team reconstructed the victims' faces using mannequins. The main crater left by the impact contained most of the aircraft's fuselage, the inner part of the left wing, the left main landing gear, and the nose gear. Portions of the plane's right wing and fuselage, right main landing gear, horizontal and vertical tail surfaces, and 2 of the engines were found within 360 feet of the crater. A trail of debris from the plane extended 4 miles from the point of impact. In its entirety, the left wingtip was found nearly 2 miles from the crash site. Parts of the wreckage ripped a 40-foot wide hole in a country road, shattered windows in a nearby house, and spread burning jet fuel across a wide area. The Civil Aeronautics Board, or CIB, was notified of the accident, and investigators were immediately dispatched from Washington, D.C. Witnesses described hearing the explosion and seeing the plane in flames as it descended. Of the 140 witnesses interviewed, 99 reported seeing an aircraft or a flaming object in the sky. 7 of them witnessed lightning strike the aircraft. 72 witnesses said that the ball of fire occurred at the same time or immediately after the said strike. 23 witnesses reported the aircraft exploded after seeing it ablaze, and 4 witnesses saw the aircraft burning as it fell. The CAB assigned more than a dozen investigators within an hour of the crash. Investigators from the Boeing Company, Pan Am, the Airline Pilots Association, Pratt & Whitney, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Federal Aviation Agency assisted the CAB team. The cost of a CAB investigation rarely exceeds $10,000, but the agency spent about $125,000 investigating this crash, which is equivalent to $1.3 million today. That's not including the money spent by Boeing, the FAA, Pratt & Whitney, or any other aircraft parts suppliers. Initial theories included the severe turbulence had caused a fuel tank or fuel line to rupture, causing a fire from leaking fuel. U.S. House Representative Samuel S. Stratton of Schenectady, New York, contacted the FAA, urging them to restrict jet operations in turbulent weather. However, the FAA said it saw no need for such restrictions, and Boeing concurred. Investigators also considered sabotage or lightning, but by nightfall after the first day, they found no evidence of either. Airline spokesman discounted speculation that metal fatigue resulting from the aircraft's 1959 incident could have been a factor. They claimed the jetliner had undergone 4 complete overhauls since the accident, with no apparent problems found in any of said overhauls. Investigators rapidly located the flight data recorder, These are built to survive the impact of a crash. However, it had been badly damaged in this specific crash. CAB Chairman Alan S. Boyd said, quote, "It was extremely compacted. There is no way to tell at this time whether we can derive any useful information from it," end quote. Eventually, investigators extracted data from 95% of the tape in the recorder. The recovery of the wreckage took 12 days, with 16 truckloads of debris hauled to Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., for investigators to examine and reassemble. One investigator said it was almost certain that an in-flight explosion of some sort occurred. Within days, investigators said the crash had apparently been caused by an explosion that had blown off one of the wingtips. The left wingtip had been found a few miles from the crash site with burn marks and bulging from what looked like an internal explosion. 9 feet of remnants from the wingtip had been found at several points along the flight path just short of the impact crater. Investigators said rough turbulence was unlikely to have caused the crash because the crews of other aircraft that had been circling in the area reported that the air was relatively smooth at the time. They also said the plane would have had to dive a considerable distance before it would break apart and explode, but the aircraft had seemingly caught fire close to its cruising altitude of 5,000 feet. Before this flight, lightning had not been known to cause a plane to crash, despite many instances of planes being struck. In normal operations, an airplane is typically struck by lightning once or twice a year without causing any problems. Experts and airline industry representatives disputed the early theory that lightning possibly caused the aircraft to explode, calling it improbable. The only similar event involving a mid-air fuel explosion caused by weather occurred on June 26, 1959, when TWA Flight 891, a Lockheed Starliner, crashed near Milan, Italy, as a result of static electricity igniting fuel vapor emanating from the fuel vents. Investigators examining Flight 214 found multiple lightning strike marks on the left wingtip and a large area of damage that extended along the rear edge of the wing, leading them to conclude that lightning was indeed the cause. The CAB launched an urgent research program in an attempt to identify conditions in which fuel vapor in the wing tanks could ignite when struck by lightning. Within a week of the crash, the FAA issued an order requiring the installation of static electricity dischargers on the approximately 100 Boeing jet airliners that were not already equipped with them. Aviation industry representatives criticized the order, stating that there was no evidence the dischargers would have any beneficial effect, considering they were not designed to handle lightning strikes in the first place. They said the order would only serve to create a false impression that the risk of lightning strikes had been resolved, while lacking any actual benefit. The CAB conducted a public hearing in Philadelphia in February 1964 as part of its investigation. Experts had yet to prove that lightning caused the accident. However, they were looking into ways that lightning could have triggered the explosion. The FAA also said it would conduct research to determine the relative safety of the 2 types of jet fuel used in the United States, both of which were present in the fuel tanks of Flight 214. Criticism of the JP4 or Jet B fuel in some of the tanks was related to the fact that its vapor can easily ignite at the low temperatures encountered in flight. Advocates of Jet B countered, stating the fuel was as safe or even safer than Jet A, the other fuel used in turbine engines, which was also present in Flight 214's fuel tanks. In a test flight designed to simulate moderate to rough turbulence while in flight, Pan Am tested a Boeing 707 to find out whether fuel could leak from the tank venting system during such conditions. The test did not reveal any fuel discharge, but did show some fuel had entered the venting system, collected in the surge tanks, and returned to the fuel tanks. Pan Am said it would test a new system to inject inert gas into the air pockets in the fuel tanks in hopes of reducing the risk of ignition of hazardous fuel air mixtures in those spaces. On March 3, 1965, the CAB released its final accident report. The investigators concluded that a lightning strike had ignited the fuel-air mixture in the number 1 reserve fuel tank, causing an explosive disintegration of the outer part of the left wing, resulting in loss of control. Despite one of the most intensive research efforts in its history, the agency failed to identify the exact mechanics of unwanted fuel ignition, concluding that lightning had ignited fuel vapor through an unknown pathway. The board said, quote, "It is felt that the current state of the art does not permit an extension of test results to unqualified conclusions of all aspects of natural lightning effects. The need for additional research is recognized and additional programming is planned." End quote. The crash called attention to previously unknown risks to aircraft from lightning strikes. 1 month after the crash, the The FAA formed a technical committee on lightning protection for fuel systems, which included lightning experts as well as representatives from the FAA, the CAB, and other government agencies. The committee agreed to conduct both long and short-term studies on the impact lightning has on aircraft fuel systems and potential measures to prevent such hazards. In 1967, the FAA updated safety standards for transport category airplanes with requirements that fuel systems must be designed to prevent the ignition of fuel vapor caused by lightning strikes within the system, and simultaneously published directions and guidelines related to said requirements. Further requirements regarding the protection of aircraft from lightning were enacted in 1970. Many aircraft design improvements emerged as a result of the research. New regulations mandated the electrical bonding between the surface of the aircraft and any items installed on the surface of the wings near the tanks, such as fuel filler caps, drain valves, and access panels. Fuel vent flame arresters were added to aircraft to detect and discharge fire suppressant to extinguish fuel vapors that ignite at the fuel vent outlets. Passive flame arresters were also added to internal vent pipes to help extinguish any flames that make it past the first stage arresters. The minimum thickness of the aluminum surfaces on aircraft wings was increased to reduce the potential for lightning completely melting through a wing surface into the wing's internal components and fuel tanks. In February 1964, the FAA asked the Coordinating Research Council, the Petroleum Industry Research Group, to conduct a technical review regarding the safety hazards of turbine fuels in civil aircraft operations. The council formed a group on aviation fuel safety composed of engineers from the airline, airframe, and petroleum industries, intending to study the safety and usage of several aviation fuels. Also, to determine whether the adoption of a single turbine fuel by commercial aviation would result in a significant decrease in the likelihood of accidents and or loss of life. After a period of review, the group concluded that although there are operational differences among the fuel types, the adoption of a single type of aviation fuel would not significantly improve the safety of commercial aviation, and recommended that airlines continue to be individually responsible for fuel type selection.
Here at the Cecil County Historical Society, the tragedy is well documented in newspaper clippings, in photographs from the crash site, and in the death certificates of the passengers on board. But the most compelling memories come from the eyewitness accounts of those who responded to the worst plane crash in Maryland's history.
I remember it as if it had happened yesterday.
Don Hash was a young state police trooper back in 1963. He was the first to respond to the crash site after watching the plane nosedive to the ground.
I can recall vividly seeing the lightning coming out across the sky, and a short time, seconds later, the aircraft coming down out of the clouds and engulfed in a large orange ball of fire.
Old photos and film negatives show the wreckage, unrecognizable pieces of debris from the Boeing 707 that carried 81 passengers and crew members. The plane was on its way from Baltimore to Philadelphia. There were no survivors.
And, the whole community, came together with that and responded to what was absolutely an enormous catastrophe for a little town of 5,000 people.
This December, family members of the passengers on board, first responders that night, and local historians will all gather for a remembrance program to mark the official 50th anniversary. In Elkton, Melinda Roeder, Fox 45 News at 5:30.
I remember someone telling me about this plane crash when I was in high school. I did not know the extent of it all until I started researching for this video. It was extremely tragic, but I'd be lying if I said I was surprised about a Boeing crashing. Rest in peace to the people who lost their lives on that cold December evening back in 1963. Thank you all for watching. And as usual, if you're a fan of urban legends, folklore, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and all things mysterious, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel.